Hey guys, welcome to the tutorial. Today we're going to build a medieval style house on this little hillside here overlooking the Back Bay waters. Let's get started. So I usually like to clear the grass so that it doesn't poke through the foundation blocks or the floor of the house basically. If you're building an elevated foundation you don't have to do this step, but I just like to clear an area of grass and maybe level it out a little bit to give myself a little platform to build from. Next we're going to pick out a block texture, stretch it out to about 5 by 5 by 1 and snap them together. Default key for modular snapping is enter. And I'm going to put 9 here. I like to make the foundation slightly larger than the house. Here I'm putting a different block texture on the outside to give the appearance of a retaining wall. And the part I didn't show is using the quarter round blocks to finish the corners, but that's what I used to fill in. The first beam you're going to place for the timber frame of this house is the most important. It'll determine where all the other ones go. And you want to make sure you're using local texture alignment. Because anytime you use a wood texture, it wants to follow the direction of the world, not the beam. So when you switch it to local, it'll follow the beam. So 5 blocks long, 0.5 by 0.5 wide is what I'm using here. And I'm just snapping them together. As you see, I'm using 45-degree block rotation, which you'll find in your C radial menu. And I'm just double tapping that key in each direction and snapping them together. We're going to do 4 5 by 5 size blocks with obviously a 0.5 beam in between each one. And we're just going to make a nice square. It's important to note that the way I've stretched these blocks is the part of it that's 5 blocks long and not 0.5 is the page up, page down axis. Key wise, and the reason that's important is because if you stretch it any other way, then the texture might not work properly. This is the only way I've found that the wood beam grain will remain in the direction that you want it to be. Alright, we're looking good. Let's just put some support beams across the middle here to complete our cell structure. This is going to determine the walls inside the house. So if you don't want this to be, if you want your rooms a different size or whatever, you can change this part dimensionally speaking. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to just make it easy and make all the rooms evenly sized. So that's our basic frame, timber frame, that we're going to be working with. From this point we can determine our windows and walls. So we're going to go back to default texture alignment, texture scale 1, and I chose sandstone. You can choose anything you like. This just looks like wattle and daub style walls, so that's why I chose it. But this first block is going to determine the bottom level of the window, so where the window's basically going to start. So I believe this is 1.5 by 0.3 and it's obviously 5 blocks long. Next, you're going to determine the window's total height by putting the top block in and basically just filling in that space. I didn't like how big this particular window size was, so I'm going to remove it and try again. I like to do slightly smaller windows than that on these older houses to kind of show that there's enough room for details and whatnot on the sides. Go ahead and do that on all your other windows now, and you can usually just copy the blocks by hitting the insert key and, you know, snapping them. The walls that are perpendicular obviously have to be resized, so you can copy those. And if you're gonna do a fireplace or a chimney, leave one of these walls empty. Don't put any blocks in it. In this case, I'm gonna fill all the walls in and go back later and add a chimney for those of you who want one. Now that we've done all the windows, let's go back to the door spaces, take those placeholders out, and we'll snap it to the beam in the center node there. Go all the way to the ceiling with it. And in this case, I think I'm just going to do 1.4, it looks like, and then do that on all the doors, and then they'll be ready for frames. When you go to do the top of the door, I like to make it the same height as the top of the window to keep all the doors and windows kind of at the same height. It gives it nice symmetry and makes everything look even. But you absolutely don't have to do that if you don't want to. Alright, so our house is looking pretty good so far. Got all of our window shapes in, all of our doors. I guess now we can start putting window frames in. And we'll be snapping to the sides since they start right there. And the normal beam is 0.5 by 0.5. I think here I'm using 0.2 by 0.5. You want it to be the same thickness as the main beams on either side, so that they will protrude a little bit and give it kind of an accent. Again, you want to make sure that you're using local texture alignment. Anytime you're using the wood beams, that should be turned on. I recommend doing all the windows that are the same direction first with the beams, because when you do a perpendicular wall, you have to adjust the dimensions to match that direction of wall, as you see here. So in order to not have to do that 3 or 4 different times, do all the windows that are the same direction first, and then change and do all the windows that are the other direction. And you'll find it'll go a lot quicker that way. Here I'm going to demonstrate how I flip the beam into the other beam to get the direction that I want from it. And I'm using 0.5 movement scale. And the reason for that is because I want it to be overlapping with the wall so that there's no gaps. Once you get the dimensions of your upper beam figured out, you're going to hit right control and enter manual adjustment mode. And you're going to slide that beam over and up a little bit so that it's slightly overlapping the wall and slightly overlapping the 2 side beams. And that way you know you have a nice overlap, there's no gaps, and it looks like a nice tight fitting beam. You can obviously change the beam dimensions all you want to get different designs. In this case, I just copied top and bottom for ease of replication. And then I just manually lowered that other beam to the bottom of the window the same way I did at the top. Rinse repeat on all the windows, And once you're done with that, then you can move on to the doors. The nice thing about having symmetrical designs is that you can easily copy a beam by just looking at it and pressing the insert key. And as you see here, I'm just using it for this top and bottom of the window frame. It makes things go a lot quicker when they're symmetrical. Alright, moving on to the door frames. It's pretty much the same concept, just longer beams. You obviously predetermine your door size when you put the wall up, so if you need to adjust that for any reason, all you obviously have to do is take those side walls out and make them smaller. But in this case, it's the same concept. You just flip the beam over, snap it to the edge there like you see, and then manually slide it over and up. Moving on to doors, your adjustment scale is going to be determined by 0.01. And the reason for that is because the adjustment on the doors is slightly different than blocks. So in order to fit specific door jamb sizes, that's the only way to get it at the right adjustment increment, so to speak, for it to fit. So for interior doors, I like to choose a different door texture, one with less metal obviously, for the bedroom door. Next we're going to choose the window pane pattern. I like to use the D window frame. And what I'll do is I'll rotate it 45 degrees and then manually place it so that it overlaps into the wall, as you'll see here. And it gives you this nice lattice work window frame pattern that you can hide in the walls. Once you get the size correct, you're going to want to adjust your movement scale to 0.25, and that will give you the ability to easily center that lattice work inside the window frame. You also want to make sure that you're on default texture alignment, otherwise it'll have this weird stretch texture effect on the window frame lattice. So you're going to rinse repeat with all the windows. Obviously just use your arrow keys to rotate to the correct wall direction and get all your window frames in. So there you have it with all your window frame lattices. And now we're going to go to glass and get some window panes. I like to use clear glass because it's easy to see through. Square pane, since we used a square lattice window frame, and just pop those in. For those of you who want a fireplace, we're going to remove this wall here. I just wanted to show what it would look like without one, and we're just going to take that out, and then we're going to do the same as we did with the doors and make two side walls that go all the way to the ceiling, but just slightly smaller so that you get a bigger, wider fireplace than the door. Alright, next we're going to do the hearth of the fireplace. I usually start with a brick block of some kind and then snap everything off of that. So once you get your hearth placed, then you can snap your walls off of it. I'm going as wide as the walls will touch here. Sometimes you can leave space in between for the wall. I like to put the wall on top in this case, and then just go all the way up to 5 blocks with it. And then you can just replicate that on both sides. Alright, once you get the body of the fireplace done, you can choose a cap for it. You can do triangle, square, rounded. I like to do half cylinder, and then do a couple of hollow cylinders as well to put on top of it. This part's kind of tricky. Sometimes it won't let you rotate certain directions with these blocks, so you just have to find the right order with which to manipulate them to get them to go that way. As you can see here, I'm kind of trying every direction. But once you get that edge lined up, then just stretch the block out to cover the top as a cap, and then that'll give you something to put the hollow cylinder onto. I'm gonna not use modular snapping so that I can just manually point towards where I want it, and then I'm gonna use the manual movement adjustment to finish that movement because I need it to clip through the top of that half dome there. And then this part we're going to stretch down. This is just the rim, and we're going to use texture scale 2 so that the blocks look the same size as the ones below it. Otherwise they will be smaller because of how much smaller that cylinder is. Next we're going to add some arches to the face of the fireplace. You don't have to do this part if you don't mind a square opening, but I like the arch top of fireplace opening. It looks more old school. So we're just going to snap an arc block to it. I believe I'm using 0.3 thickness here, and then just stretch it out on each end. Obviously if you place that front block inside the 2 side blocks, then it'll line up a little better than it did here, but it still works because it snaps into it. And we'll go ahead and choose our stone trim block. I like using this dark brown rounded block here, and we're going to snap it to the corner and size it down so that it'll stack nicely on that front edge there. And then we're going to manually hit right control and manually push that block in and over, and then hold left click and just drag it straight up, and it'll give you a nice column of rounded blocks that are snapped on top of each other. And it's important that you do that because if you snap to the side node instead of the very center one that's on top of the block, it'll have a different spacing. So we're going to repeat that here, and then later on we can go back and add or subtract or connect them across the top or whatever you want to do, but for now we're just doing the corners to give it some accent. Next we'll add the hearthstone, just same diameter and everything, just stretched out and snapped into place, of course, with center snapping, and then manually pushed in. Next, we will put a fireplace in there. If you do that, you can't use it as a grill or skewer or anything on it. You can't cook on it. This one's just for show, but if you wanted to cook on it, you could just use a campfire manually placed in there. Next, we're going to do the roof frame. Make sure you're on local texture alignment, texture scale 1, and we're going to do 5-degree block rotation instead of 45. I think I'm going to do 35 degrees for the initial roof pitch, and it's going to be a double pitched roof. So we're going to start there, and then we'll do about 3.5, I think 3.5 blocks long will be a good length. We're going to go to 0.1 stretch precision or scale precision to get down to that size. And then we're going to do that on the same side, 35 degrees. Now it's going to show you the opposite degree rotation on the legend there. So just count the number of degrees. In this case, 5 degrees 7 times is 35 degrees. And that's how I've just remembered that process instead of relying on the degrees that are displayed. So we stretch that second block out to 4 blocks long instead of 3.5 to duplicate that angle. And then we're just going to, instead of adding a block to the end here, I'm actually going to remove it and make that one longer so that we save wood. If you're building this in survival, obviously you want to use less beams as opposed to more. And that also helps with lag if there's less beams. So we're just going to redo those two, but just slightly longer. That'll be 5 blocks long instead of 3.5 and 35 degrees. And we'll go back later and fill in the gaps where the two beams meet. Next, we're just going to duplicate that roof line by, we're going to use 0.5 or half a block movement scale. And we're going to snap and go into manual mode. And we're just going to slide those over half a block at a time. And as you can see, it's real easy. Just again, manual mode, slide it over, and it's real easy to place them when they're a half block movement scale. Alright, next we're going to start filling in the roof frame with the support beams. 5 by 0.5 by 0.5 again, and just rotate. I'm still using 5-degree rotation, but you don't have to. You can go back to 45 at this point. Everything else will be 45 or 90-degree rotations. So we put those main beams in, and then now we got to do the inner support beams that are connected to that. That'll link all of them together. And here you're gonna see if I just do a 90-degree rotation, part of it sticks out. So we're gonna snap it into the block like we did with the windows and doors. And that way it won't stick out like that. So see, it's slightly lower. By doing that, it's much more in line with the blocks that are below it. Next, we'll do the top roof beams, same as we did on below, just 90 degrees, snap them all together, and then we'll fill in the gaps later on. Okay, now I'm going to show you how there's a couple of ways that you can achieve this next beam. You can either snap off of the one that's going up or the one that's off the middle. I prefer to do the one that's off the middle and just go 45 degrees. That way it's one key press, it's a lot quicker to install, and you get a perfect 45-degree angle across all the beams. Alright, so that's our basic roof frame. Obviously we can go back and fill in the gaps and everything with beams. You can do as I'm doing here with a square beam. Sometimes I like to use the rounded blocks and put those in there. It joins all the beams together nicely. In this case I think I'll just use square beams, make it look like a regular beam sticking out. And we'll just do that on all the corners and all the gaps. Okay, next we gotta finish the wall up in the eaves of the roof. I like to do that by starting with a square block and then snapping triangular or sloped blocks onto the sides or top of it. It tends to make filling that space easier, and it takes the least amount of blocks to do it that way. So as you'll see here, we'll start with a nice square block that'll hopefully, if you can, depending on the roof pitch angle, connect the bottom of the center beam to the center of the roof pitch, as you see I've done here. And then once you get those in, then you can snap the slope blocks to the sides and top of it. Okay, so we have our eaves done, walls all done up the top. Now we got to move on to addressing the gap between the roof beam and the wall beam. There's two ways you can do this. I'm going to show you the first way, and that is to take the wall texture and put a small portion of it on top of the beam, as I'm doing here. The second method, which I prefer, is to remove the top beam from the wall and resize its thickness. You maintain the same width and length, but you just make it slightly taller to take up that gap. Okay, next we're gonna choose our roofing texture. I really prefer 920. It looks like a square slate tile. And if you're not doing individual tiles, which is a more advanced method, this is the best looking one in my opinion. And it'll do nicely on this medieval house. So we're just gonna flatten it down to 0.1. We're gonna leave it at 1 block wide. And in this case, this first beam, we're going to go the full length, which is 5 blocks, because that's how long the beam is. And you might find that the texture of the block is sometimes inverted, or some blocks it doesn't matter, they're bidirectional. In this case, the slate one is not bidirectional. So if you find that the texture doesn't look right, then what you do is you snap the same size block to the side of it, as I'm going to do here. And then in the very middle node, you can rotate it perfectly to the opposite side. And then once you can see the difference in texture there. And once you do that, then you can just snap the other block to that one and it'll copy that texture direction. And then if you snap all your other blocks to that, it'll copy that texture. And once you go 5 by 5 by 0.1, you can snap it and do 1 block on the end, just like I did there. Rinse, repeat on the other side, and you'll have yourself a nice little rooftop in no time. Now we're moving on to the second half. It's a little shorter, so I copied the first 1 by 5 by 0.1 block there, and then I just shortened it. And doing the same on the other side. Obviously I've got to flip the texture, so I've got to do that trick again. And then once I've got that fixed, I can stretch the blocks out like I did below, but obviously slightly different dimension, and I can just fill in the roof. Okay, so there's our initial roof tile. We got everything sealed up now. I think we should move inside and work on the interior textures for the roof. I like to use 159 or 160. In this case, we'll use 160 square block. And then you're just going to use the insert key and copy the roof tile size and just snap that wood right onto it, basically, giving you a nice interior roof texture. Once those are all in place, then you'll notice that you have kind of an exposed edge with those two layers of roofing. So what we're going to do is just add some trim that matches the house beams. So we're just going to move that down to size and cover the whole outer edge of the roof with it. And of course, make sure that we're on local texture alignment. Otherwise, you'll get this texture like you see on this beam here. Okay, moving inside now, we're going to put some support beams on the inside to give the interior roof space a little bit of detail and show that it's not just floating blocks. So we're basically just snapping these support beams to the center of those roof blocks and then either rotating them 90 degrees or leaving them perfectly vertical and then manually moving them over at 0.05 increment. Okay, so that's our roof support beams and joists, and now we have a nice complete roof. Alright, next we're going to add some simple accent beams. This is just to give some detail to the walls and to make the structure look more robust and like it's a real actual building. Sometimes you gotta mess around with the spacing. For example, here I did one block and it ended up being too close to the door beams, so I'm going to adjust it to half a block, and I'm going to make all the walls that exact same spacing for symmetry, and then that way it's A, it's easier to build, replicate each wall, and B, a door or a window will both fit in that spacing. Next, we're going to do our cross member beam. This is going to lay across all the other beams and act as if it's supporting the window frame. So we'll stretch it to length here, same width as the main house beam, so it sticks out both sides. And then we're going to just scoot that up to the bottom of the window frame so that it intersects with that bottom block there. So now that we have a cross member in, we can basically snap off of it the same way we did when we first started the timber frame. And even though some walls are not completely solid, we're just going to lay the beams out as if they were, just so we can daisy chain snap through all the walls. It's the quickest way to do it. And then you can go back and remove the beams that aren't meant to go all the way across, and you can just add the smaller, shorter beams into the sides of the window or the door or whatever it is that you're not trying to snap through. And there you have it. That's all of our accent beams in. And now we have a nice looking medieval house. That's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. Please check out my server, Rowan's Renaissance, on Rising World Unity, as well as my blueprint collection on the Rising World forums. Thanks again. See you on the next one.